Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're setting the stage for a massive archaeological mystery. We're talking about a puzzle that literally threatens to upend everything we thought we knew about human history. You see, behind the official, established records of our ancient past, there is this incredibly fierce, highly polarized debate that scholars have been fighting over for decades. So, we're going to dig into the source material surrounding some deeply controversial archaeological sites, and we'll look closely at the exact evidence that has managed to split the scientific community right down the middle. Now, you might be wondering, what's the big deal? Well, the scale of the question here is just staggering. We aren't just talking about a minor little tweak to the record books. We're looking at discoveries where rogue excavators and certain researchers claim to push human activity in the Americas back by a staggering 115,000 years, or even more. As you can imagine, this has triggered a massive clash with mainstream academia, who are absolutely demanding rigorous, unshakable proof before they even think about rewriting the textbooks. To really grasp why this is causing such an uproar, we first need to take a look at the established scientific timeline. Up until very recently, mainstream scientists generally agreed on a pretty standard story. The first humans left Africa around 70,000 to 80,000 years ago. According to this consensus, they eventually made their way across the globe, migrating into North America no earlier than about 15,000 years ago, which gave rise to what's known as the Clovis culture. So here is the massive chasm in the scientific community, and it really comes down to two completely different paradigms. On one side, you have the established, widely accepted 15,000-year timeline, nice and tidy. But on the other side, you have a series of highly contested, heavily debated discoveries suggesting humans might have been here hundreds of thousands of years ago. Let that sink in. If these extreme dates are accurate, it means early humans were thriving in the Americas when theoretically Homo sapiens hadn't even left Africa yet. It's a complete paradigm shift. A really crucial piece of this logistical puzzle is Beringia. Think of it as a massive, prehistoric highway, an ancient land bridge that stretched all the way from Siberia into Canada. Now, most of it is completely underwater today, but for a brief window in prehistory, it was dry land. Mainstream science dictates that ancient humans used this exact bridge to simply walk into North America. So, with that geographical foundation in our back pocket, we are going to start making some big chronological leaps backward in time to examine these controversial sites. All right, Section 1, the Bluefish Caves, let's dive into our first stop. Picture this, it's 1976, and a group of fishermen discover three small caverns in Canada's remote Yukon Territory. Researchers eventually analyze the site and present a jaw-dropping date of 24,000 years ago. Now, sure, while that isn't quite as dramatic as 130,000 years, it was a massive controversy when this research hit the spotlight again back in 2017. Why? Because it challenged the conventional timeline by nearly 10,000 years, pushing human presence in Canada way back to a time long before the Clovis people were ever thought to have arrived. So what's the actual evidence here? Researchers from the University of Montreal, including Ariane Burke and Lauriane Bourgeon, studied the animal bones they found in the caves. They ended up identifying 23 specific bone fragments with very distinct V-shaped cut marks on them. According to their analysis, stone tools almost always leave these very obvious V-shaped streaks right on the walls of the bone. Because the cave looks a lot more like a predator's den than a human settlement, the researchers concluded that ancient humans were likely cannibalizing the remains of animals that had been dragged in there by other predators. But hold on, because here is where the fierce pushback begins. Impartially speaking, a lot of mainstream scientists flat out refuse to accept this conclusion. The main sticking point? Absolutely no stone tools or charcoal from cooking fires have ever been found at the Bluefish Caves. Skeptics argue that without the actual physical tools or even the ashes of a hearth, you simply cannot definitively connect those V-shaped slices on the bones to human activity. Okay, moving south for Section 2, Chiquihuite Cave. We're talking high up in the mountains of central Mexico, about 9,000 feet above sea level. Extensive excavations here in 2016 and 2017 yielded an astonishing date, 26,500 years ago. To make sure they were accurate and to prepare for the inevitable academic pushback, scientists actually dated 46 different samples of animal bone and charcoal from the surrounding soil, and they repeatedly hit that 26,500-year mark. But of course, this raises a glaring logistical question. How on earth could humans have reached central Mexico 2,000 years before they were supposedly crossing the Beringia land bridge way up in Canada? Well, lead archaeologist Cyprian Ardalan and his team unearthed almost 2,000 sharpened rocks that they classify as stone points. What's really fascinating here is that over 90% of these artifacts were crafted from this greenish, blackish stone that isn't even local to the mountain. Plus, they don't look anything like Clovis tools. Ardalan argues these represent an entirely unknown human population, a completely unique technological tradition that actually occupied this cave for over 10,000 years. However, the skepticism here is incredibly sharp. Check out this brilliant quote from archaeologist Lauren Davis. It perfectly captures the mainstream rebuttal. He says, "Humans don't have a monopoly on the narrow band of physics required to break rocks." Ouch. Basically, Davis and others argue these aren't tools at all. They're just naturally broken rocks created by standard geological forces, like a cave ceiling collapsing. Furthermore, critics point to a total lack of domestic evidence. There are no fire pits, no butchered animal bones, no storage pits. To the skeptics, an occupation lasting 10,000 years without leaving behind a single fire pit is practically impossible to authenticate. Let's up the ante a bit. Section 3, the Topper Site. Down at an ancient chert rock quarry in Allendale County, South Carolina, respected archaeologist Albert Goodyear decided to dig deeper, literally, beneath the established 12,000-year-old Clovis layer. When traditional dating methods failed on the deeper artifacts, he used a highly advanced technique called optically stimulated luminescence. It essentially blasts mineral grains with light to measure trapped electrons, revealing exactly how long the soil has been buried. The result? He dated the artifacts at the deepest strata to an unbelievable 50,000 years ago. The absolute crown jewel of Goodyear's 50,000-year-old claim is this large chunk of Allendale chert, affectionately nicknamed Big Red. Goodyear pulled this thing directly out of the dirt and identified 3 very distinct strike marks on it. To him, the way it was chipped looked exactly like the deliberate shaping done by an ancient human toolmaker, who maybe got frustrated, was displeased with their work, and just tossed it aside. But dropping that 50,000-year date, that turned Albert Goodyear from a universally respected academic into a highly controversial figure practically overnight. Skeptics, led by experts like Michael Waters, argue that Big Red is nothing more than a natural formation. Their primary argument is isolation. You see, Big Red was found all by itself. Waters argues that if a human population was actively crafting tools 50,000 years ago, you wouldn't just find one isolated rock, right? There should be an entire ecosystem of archaeological evidence around it. All right, Section 4, the Cerutti mastodon. Let's jump to 1992. Paleontologists are doing some routine monitoring during a highway expansion in San Diego, and they unearth a prehistoric puzzle that honestly shouldn't exist. Advanced radiometric dating on the bones found at this site confirmed an age of 130,000 years. This number changes the entire global conversation. It places early humans in North America during the late Pleistocene era. To put that into perspective, that's a time when mainstream consensus suggests Homo sapiens were theoretically just beginning to leave Africa in small, localized groups. The excavators didn't just find a mastodon skeleton, though. Right next to the animal's remains, they found 5 large stones functioning as hammerstones and anvils. The mastodon bones and teeth were crushed in a very specific way that suggests systematic bone marrow extraction. To researchers like Steve Holland, having these tools sitting right next to processed remains is undeniable proof of a prehistoric kill or scavenging site. Now, as for how they crossed the oceans that early, supporters actually point to historical recreations, like Thor Heyerdahl's famous raft voyages across the Pacific, as proof that ancient ocean crossings were physically possible. But to really understand the massive academic pushback to these extreme dates, we have to talk about an essential term, the geofact. A geofact is essentially a naturally formed rock that closely mimics the shape of a human-made tool. This concept is literally the primary weapon used by skeptics. Whenever a site produces wild dates like 50,000 or 130,000 years ago, the immediate mainstream response is often that the tools are simply geofacts, shaped by tumbling rivers, natural pressure, or geological shifts, rather than by human hands. Finally, Section 5, we are heading to the extreme edge, Calico and Huitlaco. We are now looking at 2 sites that are so heavily debated, they literally cost famous world-renowned scientists their professional reputations and sparked some of the longest-running controversies in all of archaeology. First up, we have the Calico Early Man site in the Mojave Desert. Legendary archaeologist Louis Leakey, the same guy who helped prove human evolution in Africa, claimed to have found 200,000-year-old stone tools by an ancient lakebed. His reward for this? Mainstream academia dragged his reputation right through the mud, with geologists like Vance Haynes claiming they were merely geofacts. Then we have Huitlaco, down in Mexico. Professor Cynthia Irwin-Williams found sophisticated stone tools right alongside prehistoric animal bones. Advanced dating methods, including zircon fission track dating on volcanic ash, placed the site at an astronomical 370,000 years old. The pushback here was vicious. Critics from outside the investigation even publicly accused her team of deliberately planting the artifacts to fake the results. So, what should you take away from all this? The source material we've explored today presents a scientific community that is locked in a total stalemate. On one hand, we have the established 15,000-year Clovis timeline, demanding rigid, irrefutable proof. On the other hand, we have shattered mastodon bones, mysterious V-shaped cuts, and isolated stone tools stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. We've seen the evidence, and we've seen the fierce skepticism from both sides. Now, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Based on everything you've seen in this explainer today, when do you think humans first arrived in the Americas, and how do you suppose they got here?